When Chris and Channon didn't show up for their friend's party that Saturday night, and they weren't answering their phones, their friends knew immediately something was wrong. And when Channon didn't come home the next day as she had promised her parents over the phone, they quickly formed a search party to find her. Sunday morning, January 7th, 2007. A railroad employee making his regular rounds on the tracks near Chipman Street in North Knoxville, Tennessee, came across something he could not explain. A human body, burned so completely that identifying who it was would require dental records and autopsy. His name was Christopher Newsom. He was 23 years old. He had been raped, hands tied to his back, socks stuffed in his mouth and duct taped, shot 3 times and set on fire, and the people who did it left him there beside the tracks like something discarded. It didn't end there. 3 miles from those tracks, at that same moment, inside a rental house on Chipman Street, a young woman, Channon Christian, was dying. She was 21 years old, a college senior, weeks from graduation. She had been held captive for hours, subjected to prolonged assault, tortured, before she was placed inside a kitchen trash can, wrapped in over 5 garbage bags, left to suffocate slowly in the dark kitchen. A few hours before that railroad worker found Chris Newsom, Channon and Chris had been planning a normal Saturday night like every other young lovers. Dinner, a friend's party, then head home. In contrast, they were carjacked in a parking lot by strangers, heartless predators. Taken 3 miles, and that was the beginning of their gruesome nightmare. What followed would take 12 years, 8 separate trials, nearly 400 court appearances by 2 families who refused to accept what the legal system kept handing them. And somewhere in the middle of all of it, a fact would surface that had nothing to do with the crime, but had something to do with the case itself. Something so despicable that the judge handling the case had to resign and was disbarred. This is not just a story about the gruesome atrocity 5 people did inside a house on Chipman Street. It is the story of Channon Christian and Christopher Newsom, of what was done to them, of what happened afterward, and of what 2 families had to survive before anything resembling justice was finally, fully served. This is the Classic True Crime Archive. Take a moment to hit the subscribe button. Knoxville in January is gray and cold and unhurried. The University of Tennessee campus empties out over the holidays and fills back up slowly, the way a kettle comes to temperature. By the first week of January 2007, the students were returning. The semester was about to begin. Channon Gail Christian, 21 years old and a senior, born on April 29, 1985 in Nacogdoches, Texas. Her early years were spent in Louisiana before her family relocated to Tennessee in 1997. She had grown up in Farragut, on the western edge of Knoxville, the kind of suburb where people stay for generations because there is no particular reason to leave. She maintained an exceptionally close relationship with her parents. Her parents, Gary and Dina, were the kind of parents whose lives organized themselves around their daughter. Not in a smothering way, in the way that parents do when the child they raised turns out to be someone genuinely worth knowing. Channon was majoring in sociology. She was a few months away from a December 2007 graduation she had been working toward for 4 years. Those who knew her professionally and personally described her as an individual whose personality was infectious, often noted by her smile that could light up any room. She played golf. She took it seriously. She had plans, after graduation, to work with communities that needed help. She was the kind of person who saw a problem in the world and thought, I could do something about that. She had been dating Christopher Newsom since November 2006. 2 months. The people around them thought it was going somewhere because it was purely out of mutual admiration. Chris Newsom was 23 and a carpenter, and he had become a genuinely skilled one. Born on September 21, 1983, he grew up in the Halls area of North Knoxville, The kind of community that produces people who stay local and build things with their hands, and don't find that limiting. He graduated from Halls High School in 2002, where he played baseball, leadoff hitter, the position that requires the most patience and the least ego, qualities that made him a respected figure in the local sports scene. After high school, he enrolled at Pellissippi State, learned a trade, and got good at it faster than most. His father, Hugh, said Chris had a particular talent for crown molding and woodwork, the finish work that separates a careful craftsman from everyone else. Some of what Chris built is still in homes across Knox County. The hands that made it are gone. The work remains. He texted back immediately, always. His mother, Mary, says that even as an adult, he still called home. His relationship with Channon Christian was seen as a pairing of two individuals who shared similar values and a deep commitment to their families. Friends describe the two of them the way people describe pairings that make sense from the outside. She was the one with a plan for every room she entered. He was the steady one who made plans feel possible. On the evening of Saturday, January 6, 2007, they had simple plans. Dinner together. Then a party at a friend's house in the Halls area, about 10 minutes from where they were starting the night. The kind of Saturday that millions of people have, that nobody remembers afterward because nothing happened. Channon had spent the afternoon at a friend's apartment at the Washington Ridge complex on Washington Pike in North Knoxville. Chris came to pick her up around 8 in the evening. Friends remember her being in a good mood, excited about the night ahead. Around 8 o'clock, Chris pulled up. She walked out to meet him. They decided to take her 4Runner. His truck stayed in the parking lot. What neither of them knew was that someone else had arranged to be at that same parking lot that same evening. Not for them specifically, not at first, but they were there, and so was he.
It is one of the most shocking and horrifying murder cases to ever happen in East Tennessee, one that took 2 young lives full of promise and put their families through 8 criminal trials. The tragic murders shocked the community and the families of these 2 young victims. 21-year-old Channon Christian attended the University of Tennessee. Her boyfriend, Chris Newsom, was a 23-year-old former Halls High School baseball standout. Armed men carjacked and killed them just a few days into the new year of 2007. 2 young lives were lost and 2 families were forever changed. We do have a warning. The details of this case may not be suitable for some of you. According to the investigation, Chris Newsom was raped an hour or 2 before his death. In his final moments, he was marched barefoot to a nearby railroad track. He was shot 3 times in the neck, back, and head. The killers had stuffed a sock in his mouth, tied his wrists and ankles, and covered his head with a sweatshirt tied around his neck with shoestrings. His body was doused in gasoline and set on fire. A railroad employee found his body the next afternoon near the tracks.
Lamarcus Davidson was 25 years old in January 2007. He had been out of prison for 5 months. His most recent sentence, 5 years, had been for carjacking and aggravated robbery. He was released in August 2006. By January, he was living in a rental house at 2316 Chipman Street, in a working industrial pocket of North Knoxville, a few blocks from a set of railroad tracks. He was behind on his rent. He owed money on furniture he had bought on credit and could not actually pay for. On the evening of Saturday, January 6th, he had arranged to meet the woman he owed at the Washington Ridge apartment complex. The agreement was a payment of up to $100. Documents would later show he was not truly in a position to make it. That appointment, at that complex, on that evening, is in the appellate record. Channon and Chris were in that same parking lot because of a Saturday night and a party in the Halls area. Davidson was there because of a furniture debt he could not cover. That is how these 2 things met. Also at the Washington Ridge complex that night, according to later testimony, were Latalvis Cobbins, Davidson's half-brother, and Eric Boyd, a longtime associate of Davidson he met while incarcerated. What court records established is that sometime between 9, 10, and 11 that evening, the couple was approached at Channon's vehicle, armed. Davidson and his crew forced the innocent lovers into the back of the 4Runner. belonging to Channon. The drive to Chipman Street, where Davidson lived, took less than 10 minutes. At approximately 12:20 a.m. in the morning on January 7th, Xavier Jenkins, an employee of Waste Connections whose depot sat across the street from Davidson's house, arrived for his shift. He sat in his car in the parking lot. From where he was parked, he could see the house. The porch lights were on. Channon's silver 4Runner was parked out front. The house, Jenkins later told law enforcement, seemed unusually busy for that hour of the night. He had never seen that vehicle there before. At 12:33 a.m. on Sunday, January 7, Channon Christian placed a final, brief call to her parents, stating she would be home between 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. Analysis of the cell tower data confirmed this call originated in the vicinity of Chipman Street, suggesting the couple was already being held captive inside the house at that time. Her voice was steady. She gave no indication of what surrounded her. It was the last time Gary and Dina Christian heard their daughter's voice. What happened inside 2316 Chipman Street during the hours that followed is established through forensic evidence and the testimony of those who were present. The narration here will not inventory that evidence in detail. What the Knox County Medical Examiner later confirmed, and what the trial record documents, is that both Channon and Chris were subjected to prolonged and severe torture. In the early morning hours of January 7th, Chris Newsom was taken from the house. 1 a.m. Witness Jenkins sees the 4Runner leave Chipman Street with 4 men inside. Chris Newsom is taken to the railroad tracks near 9th Avenue. He is raped and subsequently shot 3 times. At approximately 1:45 inches the morning, a neighbor named Jerome Arnold would testify he heard 3 distinct gunshots. Chris Newsom was 23 years old. His body was discovered the following afternoon by a railroad worker on his regular rounds near the tracks off Chipman Street. The forensic evidence presented at trial by the Knox County Medical Examiner provided a graphic account of the trauma Chris Newsom had faced. Chris Newsom's death was an execution-style killing following an episode of sexual trauma. He was found with hands and feet bound, blindfolded with a bandana, and a sock stuffed in his mouth. He was shot 3 times with a small caliber weapon, once in the neck, once in the back, and a final, fatal shot to the head. The fatal shot was fired with the muzzle pressed against the right side of his head. His body was wrapped in a comforter and set on fire near the railroad tracks. Identification required dental records. The burning, investigators would later determine, was not an accident. It was an attempt to destroy evidence.
Of the injuries that Channon and Chris suffered. She also described their deaths and what happened to them leading up to death.
It entered again at an angle, and it goes from right to left and downward. That particular bullet entered the brain and damaged the right side of the right hemisphere of the brain, and then severed the brainstem. That's the injury that was the deadly injury. That's the injury that killed Mr. Newsom.
His hands were tied behind his back. His ankles were bound with a belt. There was a sock, probably his own socks, stuffed in his mouth, and then a shoestring, his own shoestrings, tied around that sock to keep it in his mouth. He was blindfolded, and then a shirt placed over his head. He was either carried or more likely led out to some railroad tracks near the Chipman Street house where they were held captive in January 2007. He was shot 3 times. He was on his back and dead when his body was set on fire.
At this time, Channon Christian was still alive. She was being held in the north bedroom of the house at Chipman Street. She is subjected to repeated sexual torture. She was 21 years old. She had a December graduation she was a few months away from. She had a golf game and a sociology degree, and a boyfriend who texted back immediately. And she was still alive. When the couples failed to arrive at their friend's party by 10 p.m., friends began to worry, as neither of them were responding to text messages or calls. Sunday morning came. Gary and Dina Christian waited for the call they had been promised. By 2, nothing. By 3, nothing. By 10 in the morning, Dina Christian knew. This was not like Channon. She always kept her word. She always called. The families contacted Knoxville police. They were advised to wait 24 hours before filing a missing persons report, but they couldn't wait. The families did not wait for the police. They organized their own search. They contacted Channon's cell phone provider directly and asked for the last tower her phone had pinged. The answer came back: a tower on Cherry Street, North Knoxville. They drove there. In the early hours of Monday, January 8th, at approximately 1:30 in the morning, they found it. Channon's silver 2005 Toyota 4Runner, parked at the intersection of Chipman Street and Glider Avenue. The car told a story before anyone touched it. Someone else had been in that car, and they had left one small, wrong thing behind. Inside the 4Runner, investigators found an envelope. They processed it for fingerprints. By 2:45 that morning, the print had a name: Lamarcus Davidson, known to law enforcement. His address on file: 2316 Chipman Street, 2 blocks from where the abandoned vehicle was sitting. On January 9th, 2007, police obtained a search warrant for 2316 Chipman Street. When officers arrived, the house was empty. Davidson and the others had gone. But the evidence they left behind was not. DNA evidence. Shell casings that would later be matched ballistically to the railroad tracks where Chris Newsom had been killed. Personal property belonging to both victims scattered throughout the house. Channon's purse, her camera, an iPod engraved with the words, "Channon Christian, Mom and Dad, we love you." Chris's baseball caps, his driver's license. And that's when police discovered another gruesome crime scene in the kitchen area. They found Channon. The Knox County medical examiner provided a graphic account of the trauma she faced. Channon Christian's cause of death was mechanical asphyxiation after hours of sexual torture. The medical examiner testified that her injuries were consistent with extreme sexual torture over a prolonged period. In a gruesome attempt to destroy forensic evidence, the assailants poured down her throat and scrubbed her area with bleach while she was still alive. She was hog-tied in a fetal position using strips of bedding and curtains. Her head was wrapped in a small trash bag, and she was placed inside a total of 5 garbage bags before being stuffed into a kitchen trash can. She slowly suffocated inside the trash bin while Lamarcus Davidson left the house to visit his girlfriend. She was 21 years old. She had been alive when that trash can closed around her. The medical examiner was specific about that. Investigators now had a crime scene. They had forensic evidence. They had a name on a fingerprint. They did not yet have the man. The manhunt that followed was a multi-agency effort. The Tennessee Bureau of Investigation joined. The FBI offered assistance. On January 11th, police traced phone calls between Davidson and Eric Boyd. Under pressure, Boyd led investigators to an abandoned house on Reynolds Street. Davidson was there. With him, a pair of shoes belonging to Chris Newsom and a .22 caliber revolver. The same day, LaTalvis Cobbins and George Thomas were arrested in Lebanon, Kentucky. On the computer recovered from their location, news coverage of the murders. They had been monitoring it. Vanessa Coleman was arrested days later, also in Kentucky. Eric Boyd, age 35, was the first to be tried in federal court in April 2008. The charge was accessory after the fact to a federal carjacking, the only perpetrator not initially charged with murder by the state. His own account during interrogation had portrayed Davidson as the primary actor and suggested Boyd had distanced himself once he understood what had happened. The jury did not find that account fully persuasive, but the charge before them was narrow. However, he was found guilty, got 18 years in federal prison, initially until something changed. The Christian and Newsom families sat through that verdict and said, quietly, that the fight was not over. From the moment that sentence was read, Hugh Newsom, Chris's father, said publicly that it was not enough. Eric Boyd has not been prosecuted fully, he told reporters in 2017. And until that's done, my healing will not begin. What is worth noting, and what the record supports, is that Cobbins, during his interrogation, placed Boyd at the carjacking from the beginning. He described, on tape, seeing Boyd approach the couple with Davidson, guns drawn. Boyd's own account of his involvement shifted depending on who was asking. The 18-year federal sentence was what the evidence available at that time could get him. Whether it reflected what actually happened on those railroad tracks was a question Mary Newsom was not prepared to leave unanswered. The state trials were about to begin. All other 4 remaining defendants, 1 presiding judge. His name was Richard Baumgartner. A criminal trial is not a closure. The families of Channon Christian and Christopher Newsom understood this better than most. What a trial is, at its best, is public accounting. A record. The closest a legal system can come to saying, "We saw what happened, and we are saying so out loud." The trials began in 2008 with Eric, with 4 defendants remaining, 4 separate juries, every trial requiring the families to walk back in, sit down, and hear it all again.
Mr. Cobbins, you've indicated that you wanted to tell this jury what happened.
Yes, sir.
Go ahead and do that, sir.
Yes, sir. Well, on New Year's of 06, 07, me and my girlfriend and my best friend came down here to Knoxville to celebrate New Year's with my brother. This is the first New Year's that he's been out since we were young teenagers, and I haven't seen him in years, and he had went to the penitentiary for carjacking, so I hadn't seen him, and I just wanted to reunite with him and see how he was doing. I had previously came down 2 or 3 times before that, so when me, my girlfriend, my best friend, and his girlfriend came down here, we spent New Year's together, and Stacy Lawson, George's girlfriend, went back, and we stayed down here. I think it was the first New Year, the first weekend after New Year's, a Friday, I believe, a Friday or Thursday, my brother got into it with his girlfriend, Daphne, and he beat her up, and she left. Saturday afternoon, me and my girlfriend Vanessa was in the back room playing house, I should say.
Referred to as the primary assailant, Latalvis Cobbins was tried in court in August 2009. Born December 20th, 1982, he was Davidson's half-brother. Originally from Lebanon, Kentucky, Cobbins had a history of violent crime, including a 2003 conviction in New York for third-degree attempted robbery. He arrived in Knoxville in late December 2006, shortly before the murders, accompanied by his girlfriend Vanessa Coleman and friend George Thomas. According to his own testimony, he was visiting his cousin Davidson, whom he had not seen since he got out of jail after a 5-year incarceration. Cobbins entered surprise guilty pleas to some charges at the start of the trial. His attorney told the court his client had made bad choices and was taking ownership of them. The evidence presented included DNA from Channon Christian's rape kit, which matched both Cobbins and Davidson. The medical examiner testified to the nature and duration of the assault both victims suffered.
I think almost kind of purple-blue her face is because of the asphyxia, lack of oxygen, relatively slow death. The impression here is, again, from being pressed against the garbage can, side of the garbage can. And also there are some pressure marks on her nose. Her eyes remained open, and that's why you can see some darkening, which is a drying artifact in the eyes.
Cobbins took the stand himself and gave a lengthy testimony. He described an exchange with Channon Christian during her captivity. She asked him, he said, to convince Davidson to let her go. He told her he would try, and in return, he demanded and received oral sex from Channon. Here is what he said.
So, as we're in there smoking, my brother comes to the kitchen door. "Oh, y'all ain't gonna smoke with me?" I can't hit the blunt. I can't hit the blunt. So George handed him the blunt. He takes the blunt. He said, matter of fact, come here, I need to holler at you anyway. I look up. He said, not you. I'm talking to G. Come here, G. Let me holler at you right quick. G look at me. He gets up. They go into the living room. I can hear my brother saying, look, you know I don't trust you. So you got to do something for me to trust you. You got to do something, to, you know what I mean, so I can trust you. You got to earn my trust. Him and George had got into it previously about a few days before that. And he had pushed G up against the wall or whatnot, so I could tell G was kind of scared of him. So G was like, all right. So about 5-10 minutes later, G and my brother leave. While they're gone, the girl is still in my brother's room. Vanessa's she's telling me her stomach is hurting. So she gets up and goes to the bathroom. I tell her that I'm finna go and check on the girl. As I go and check on the girl, I ask her, is she okay? She asks me, could she get some water? I brought her some water out of the refrigerator. When I went into the room, she's laying on the air mattress with her hands bound over her head. She's laying on her back. Her hands are tied, still tied like this, and tied to a duffel bag full of free weights and books and stuff. Same thing with her feet. Her ankles are tied, and it's tied to a duffel bag. It's tied to a duffel bag with weights and books in it. So I untied her hands. Well, I didn't untie her hands. I untied the string that was going to the duffel bag. I untied it so she could sit up and drink the water. I gave her the water. She drank the water like that. She asked me what's going on. I said, I don't know. She asked me where her boyfriend is. I said, I don't know. She asked me could she smoke a cigarette. Her cigarettes and her purse was sitting on the bookshelf behind me. I could see a pack of red and white Marlboros on the book stand. I said, I don't see why not. I took a cigarette out, lit it for her, and gave it to her. She asked me, why were we doing this? I told her, it's not me. It's not me. It's not me. I don't have anything to do with this. Matter of fact, we're being held here against our will, just like you are. The only difference is that you're tied up and we're not. So she started asking me. Would I convince him to let her go? I said, I'll try. She said, just please, just please. She said, please, can you just convince him to let me go? I said, I'll try. And she said, I'll do anything, just please, just let me go. And she even offered oral sex. So, and I had her give me oral sex. She gave me oral sex. As I started to ejaculate, I heard a noise outside, and I heard Vanessa flushing the toilet. So I got spooked. I jumped up, fixed my clothes. As I ejaculated, it got on her shirt and some on her pants. I fixed myself. I fixed my clothes. I put her back like I found her, and went back into the living room and sat down. Vanessa came out of the bathroom. We sat there on the floor, just sat there looking stupid. A few minutes later, Slim, my brother, George, both of them come back. They come back in. George was looking crazy. My brother came in, went back to his bedroom.
However, the jury found him guilty on all but 5 counts. He got life without the possibility of parole. The families had hoped for death. Gary Christian, leaving the courthouse, asked a question that carried no good answer. What do you got to do to earn the death penalty in this state? October 2009. Lamarcus Davidson. The man the investigation had identified as the one who arranged to be at that parking lot, who drove the 4Runner to Chipman Street, whose fingerprint was on the envelope, whose address was on file. The ringleader of this whole tragedy. His defense, during cross-examination, attempted to introduce questions about the victims' personal lives. There was testimony about Adderall and marijuana. Mary Newsom, sitting in that courtroom, responded to a reporter outside. "He's not the one on trial," she said. "Those kids were totally, completely innocent." After a week of testimony and 8 hours of deliberation, the jury found Davidson guilty of first-degree felony murder of both Channon Christian and Christopher Newsom. During the sentencing phase, the families addressed the court. "My life will never be the same," Mary Newsom told the jury, "because of a senseless crime by people who have no regard for life." Davidson was sentenced to death by lethal injection. He was transported to Riverbend Maximum Security Institution in Nashville.
My duty as a judge in this case to impose a punishment of death by lethal injection. May you find peace with your Maker.
George Thomas, born January 23, 1983, was an associate of the brothers. While his prior record was less extensive in terms of documented violent felonies compared to Davidson, he was deeply entrenched in the group's activities. At the time of the murders, Thomas was effectively homeless, sleeping on the floor of the Chipman Street house. He had accompanied Cobbins and his girlfriend to visit his brother in Knoxville. December 2009. George Thomas next. A Chattanooga jury this time. Prosecutors acknowledged they had less physical evidence tying Thomas directly to the killings than they had against Davidson or Cobbins. Their argument was presence and participation. He was in that house. He knew what was happening. The house was small enough that not knowing was not possible. According to testimonies, he was one of the 4 men seen heading to the rails that morning. The jury convicted Thomas on every charge. He got life without parole as well, initially. Vanessa Coleman, born June 29, 1988, was the youngest of the group. She was 18 years old and dating Latalvis Cobbins at the time of the incident. They'd traveled together to Knoxville. Though she did not have a prior felony record, her role as a facilitator was central to the captivity of Channon Christian. May 2010. Vanessa Coleman was the last to be tried in state court. Her attorney had initially indicated she would testify. She did not. The jury returned not guilty verdicts on the charges related to Chris Newsom's death and guilty verdicts on the charges related to Channon Christian's captivity and death, specifically facilitating rape and murder. She got 53 years initially. By the end of 2010, 5 verdicts had been delivered. Davidson was on death row. 4 others were going to prison for the remainder of their functional lives. The families had attended every hearing, every day of every trial. They had listened to everything the record required them to hear. And then, in the spring of 2011, something happened that had nothing to do with the crime, but how it was decided. In March 2011, Judge Richard Baumgartner suddenly resigned from the Knox County Criminal Court. What came out in the weeks and months that followed was this. Baumgartner had been addicted to prescription painkillers throughout the proceedings. He had been purchasing those pills from a convicted felon who was serving probation in his own courtroom. Courtroom observers later recalled noticing at the close of the Vanessa Coleman trial that the judge was slurring his words. That he sounded, as one account put it, sleepy. At the time, no one understood what they were seeing. The Tennessee Bureau of Investigation concluded that his capacity to conduct trials had been severely compromised throughout the period he presided over this case. He had been the judge at every one of the 4 state murder trials except that of Eric Boyd. In September 2011, he was disbarred. In December 2011, Senior Judge John Carey Blackwood ordered new trials for all 4 defendants Baumgartner had convicted. Gary Christian, who had sat through every hour of every trial, looked at what was being asked of his family and said what any reasonable person would have said. "If I could sit in there and hear guilty over and over and over," he told reporters, "I might get a little bit of sleep."
But what happened surrounding Judge Richard Baumgartner, the man overseeing the Christian Newsom trials, is still a shock to many people. People in court got a clue that something was wrong at the end of the Vanessa Coleman trial in 2010. The judge slurring his words and sounding sleepy as he led the jury through the charges.
Go to paragraph B.
Not guilty.
Paragraph C.
Not guilty.
Former DA Randy Nichols says his office didn't know how bad off Baumgartner really was.
Everybody knew Judge Baumgartner suffered from physical injuries and was not overly spry. We knew that, so when you would see him, it wouldn't raise much suspicion.
January 27th, 2011, an announcement that Judge Richard Baumgartner would be taking a leave of absence for medical reasons. The next day, the TBI confirming to us it was investigating Baumgartner and had been for some time. March 10th, Baumgartner pleads guilty to state charges of official misconduct, admitting his addiction to prescription painkillers.
I stand here today a humble man. I have lately let this system and this community down. Let my family down.
The plea deal giving him judicial diversion, and he resigns from the bench. Attorneys for the Christian Newsom murder start putting the wheels in motion for the sentences to be overturned. In June, a sign that there might be more to this from the ex-wife of a man prosecutors had identified as the judge's dealer.
Richard Baumgartner, he got a smack on the hand. He walked out. He should have had, do more than a treatment, I think. He was buying multiple pills I knowed of.
She was right, which would come out in December of that year. The TBI's report full of eye-popping details. Dina Castleman, a woman in Baumgartner's drug court, saying the two had a sexual relationship and she supplied him with pills, 30, twice a week for about a year, even visiting her while she was in the hospital during the Davidson trial to get his fix. So, Judge John Carey Blackwood issued his decision.
Motions for new trial are all granted.
You heard it there. Judge Richard Baumgartner would eventually serve around 5.5 months in a federal prison over what was in that file. He was released in 2013.
The families had already given everything the trials asked of them. Now, a new judge's private conduct was asking for more. The Tennessee Supreme Court, reviewing the order for new trials, drew a careful legal line. For Davidson and Cobbins, the court ruled that the misconduct, serious as it was, did not on its own invalidate the jury's unanimous findings in those specific cases. The weight of the forensic evidence was too substantial. Their original convictions would stand. For George Thomas and Vanessa Coleman, retrials would proceed. The Thomas retrial came in May 2013. Another out-of-town jury. The prosecutors walked through the same timeline again. The missing couple, the house on Chipman Street, the evidence of what had happened inside it. Thomas's attorneys continued to press on the absence of physical evidence tying him directly to the killings. His only visible reaction to the verdict, according to reporters in the room, was to shake his head. Guilty on 38 counts. Life sentences, consecutive, plus 25 years. A judge later calculated that Thomas would need to live to the age of 147 before becoming eligible for parole. The Vanessa Coleman retrial came in November 2012. Her defense argued again what it had argued the first time, that she was young, that she was Cobbins's girlfriend, that the evidence of her active participation was less clear than the prosecution maintained, that she was, in some meaningful sense, also a captive of the situation she found herself in. The prosecution's counter was documented and specific. Vanessa Coleman was left alone with Channon Christian while the others took Chris Newsom from the house to the rails. She had a window to help her escape. She had an opportunity. She did not take it. All the stuff that she knew, said prosecutor Takesha Fitzgerald. She had the opportunity to get herself out of the house. She had the opportunity to save Miss Christian. The jury deliberated for 9 hours. Guilty on 13 of 17 counts. The sentence was reduced from 53 years to 35. Dina Christian, Channon's mother, spoke to reporters after the verdict. "Chris died protecting my daughter that night," she said. "She got enough justice for them both today." While the retrials were proceeding, Mary Newsom had not stopped attending hearings related to Eric Boyd. Everyone. Boyd was serving 18 years in federal prison for accessory after the fact. He would be eligible for release. Mary Newsom had said from the beginning that the federal charge did not reflect what she believed happened on those railroad tracks in the early hours of January 7, 2007. "I've always had a mother's instinct," she said, "that he was the one who murdered my son." During interrogation in 2007, Cobbins had described, on tape, watching Boyd and Davidson approach the couple at the parking lot with guns. Boyd's own account, across 2.5 hours of interrogation, shifted as the questions changed. He positioned Davidson as the primary actor. He suggested he had stepped back once he understood the extent of what was happening. In 2019, more than 11 years after Boyd's federal conviction, a Knox County grand jury returned a 36-count presentment charging him with first-degree murder, rape, and related offenses in the deaths of both Channon Christian and Christopher Newsom. The state trial began in August 2019. George Thomas testified for the prosecution. He had reached an agreement with prosecutors, which gave him a sentencing consideration in exchange for his testimony. What Thomas told the jury did not align perfectly with his original 2007 statement, and it conflicted in some details with other testimony. He said he had not seen Boyd shoot Chris Newsom. He described seeing 3 flashes. The defense pressed on these inconsistencies. It was, as the record shows, the kind of testimony that required the jury to weigh what Thomas had to gain against what he claimed to know. On August 13, 2019, 12 years, 7 months, and 7 days after the murders, the jury returned its verdict. Eric Boyd was found guilty on nearly all counts. Judge Bob McGee sentenced him to life without the possibility of parole, plus 90 years. Mary Newsom had been right. During my research and after watching the testimonies, I kept asking why they didn't call the police. Cobbins, according to his testimony, said him, his girlfriend Vanessa, and his best friend Thomas were also held against their will after they discovered what Davidson and Boyd were up to and wanted no part of it. Only that they weren't tied up like Channon and Chris. If they'd called the police, things would have turned out differently. The legal chapter that began on January 9, 2007, when Channon's body was found in that kitchen, had taken until August 2019 to fully close. Nearly 400 court appearances by 2 families who, from the beginning, simply refused to stop showing up. Hugh Newsom, Chris's father, had said in 2017 that his healing could not begin until Boyd faced full prosecution. He had waited 12 years to say anything further. What happened after all these verdicts? There were 2 things still to come, and what Channon and Chris left behind in the record of this state. During the hearing, prosecutors argued that the motive was a combination of robbery and a predatory thrill kill. The Supreme Court of Tennessee later noted that the defendants had every opportunity to release the victims after stealing the car, yet they chose to escalate the crime into a multi-day torture event. While the victims were white and the perpetrators were black, Knoxville authorities and the victims' families eventually stated there was no evidence of racial motivation, labeling the event as a cold-blooded predatory crime.
Since the murders, the families of both Channon and Chris have worked tirelessly to bring the murderers to justice and to help others. In June of 2014, Governor Bill Haslam signed the Chris Newsom and Channon Christian Acts into law. Chris's bill ends the practice of the 13th juror, which had required a judge to sign a unanimous verdict. Shannon's bill prevents attorneys from using allegations from a victim's past if those allegations are not relevant to the case. The home where Channon Christian was tortured and killed is no longer on Chipman Street. Back in 2008, Waste Connections next door bought the site and tore down the house. But there are lasting memorials to the couple all over the Knoxville area. And the families have created events in memory of both Channon and Chris. The Newsoms created a foundation and hold the Chris Newsom Memorial Baseball Tournament every spring to honor Chris and Channon. Mary Newsom tells us the foundation has given out 42 scholarships to Hall's high school students. The Newsoms say they always hear from the scholarship recipients, and that makes them feel good. They say they think Chris would be proud of that. Shannon's family also created a foundation in her memory. The foundation was established in 2009 and has given scholarships to female Farragut High School graduates who plan to attend the University of Tennessee. It's since been opened up to be offered to students from Knox and surrounding counties who will attend UT. Most of the money is raised in a golf tournament held in her honor every year.
Channon was studying sociology because she wanted to help people who didn't have anyone helping them. The law that carries her name does exactly that, for strangers she never met. Chris took pride in building things that would last. His father said he had a particular talent for crown molding, the kind of finish work that holds a room together. The law that carries his name holds verdicts together in courtrooms across Tennessee for families who will never know his name. As of early 2026, Lamarcus Davidson remains on death row at Riverbend Maximum Security Institution. His most recent appeals, filed in 2025 and 2026, challenging a 2023 state law regarding the Attorney General's role in capital cases, have been denied. No execution date is currently set for him. LaTalvis Cobbins is serving life without the possibility of parole. George Thomas is serving life with parole eligibility after 51 years. Vanessa Coleman is serving 35 years at the Tennessee Prison for Women. She was denied parole in 2014 and again in 2020. Eric Boyd is serving life without the possibility of parole, plus 90 years. Channon would have been 40 by this year, and Chris would have been 42. There are cases that teach something about evil and cases that teach something about everything that comes after it. This one is the second kind. When someone who always calls stops calling, that silence is telling you something. Act on it immediately, not in the morning. Our thoughts remain with Gary and Dina Christian, and with Hugh and Mary Newsom, who have carried something no parent should have to carry, and who have done so with a dignity this case did not earn and did not deserve. Until the next case, thank you for spending this time in the archive.